please introduce yourself and outline your involvement with WRDA?
Okay, I mightn't get all the dates right. And thank you, Megan, for inviting me along. My involvement with the WRDA started on the 1st of April 1993 when I got a job. It wasn't actually the WRDA then, it was the Women's Education Project. And we were based in the attic up in Women's Aid in, I think it was University Street. And I was so excited to get that job. I was so excited. I can remember my first day 30 years ago or whatever it was. So I was the regional training coordinator. So that was for the whole of the North, and it was organising training and education and workshops in local communities for women's centres, women's groups. I loved that job, absolutely loved that job. And I think it was funded by the Carnegie Trust. Because I always, when I see the Carnegie libraries, I always give them a nod. Yeah.
Thank you, Patricia. And then I think...
Oh, sorry. And then there was, that was my initial involvement. Then I was the IT development coordinator. Forgot that, sorry. IT development coordinator came out of the regional training project work. So that was another, that must have been about another 6 years. Then I left the WRDA after 10 years here. And I wasn't involved for a few years, and then I came back as a management committee member. I think that might have been for about 10 years as well. So yeah, long involvement.
Thank you, Patricia. Tell us a bit about yourself and your own journey as a feminist.
Okay, I suppose growing up as a girl, I always knew there was different roles for women as there was for men, from boys as there were girls. It was always very obvious. You know, at school we had to do domestic science. I hated domestic science. The boys got out to play, to do games. I was aware of my mother's role in our home. I always knew it. I think as a girl you grow up knowing it, but I suppose I first became angry when after I went to uni. It's free education then. I went to uni and I did a degree in IT, data processing and information systems, and then I got a job in the private sector and I was a programmer, which I think the word used these days is coder. And I remember working away and there was me and another woman. There was 2 women and all the rest of the teams were men. And I started to realise that all the work that we were getting was maintaining other people's code and making sure it still worked and reviewing it. And to be honest, it was quite boring. And I had this conversation with my colleague, who was also a woman, and we were also very aware that the men who were coming in, we were all in our 20s at that age, but the men that were coming in were getting the really interesting work and the innovative work, and we were still maintaining other people's code. So we decided to go and raise this with management, and we did, and we said we didn't think it was fair. We wanted some of the innovative work as well. And it was made very clear to us that we were, as girls, we were reliable, dependable. Our work was reliable. They knew it would be done right, and that they needed to keep the young bucks interested. So that's why they got all the innovative stuff, because they didn't want them to leave. So I left. That's when I got angry, and that's when I started to think it is so important that women have access to this new technology, to participate in it, to use it, to shape it, to lead it. I think things have moved on in tech, but I'm not sure it's anywhere near what it should be. So that, I suppose that's what lit the fire in my belly, those experiences.
WRDA started life as the Women's Education Project in 1983, and we celebrate our 40th this year. how do you feel the feminist movement in Northern Ireland has changed over those 40 years?
Well, I'm sure there's other people that are better placed to answer that question than me, but what I would say is I think it's become much more visible, and I think technology, media, online media has helped that, and there's positives and negatives to that, but I think it's become much more visible. I imagine it's easier for younger people to get involved because it is visible. I think it's easier to sign up and become involved in campaigns in that. I think the place of the movement is more visible, even when you think International Women's Day is now on a Saturday in the city centre in the calendar. It didn't used to be like that. Sadly, I think a lot of the issues have moved on, but in some ways are still the same when we think of the cost of living crisis, and access to affordable childcare is just becoming more and more difficult. Access to good health care, access to women's community-based education. A lot of the issues are similar, but I think the movement is much more visible, and I think a lot of that's to do with the online world, even though there's a lot of negativities there, but I'm going to focus on the positives.
Thank you, Patricia. Just what you were saying there about having gone to university and it being free education, and then you were talking there about the continuous struggles for women's community education. A lot of people that I've interviewed have talked about how their awakening came from free university education and how that led them to really campaign for more community-based women's education. Well, of course, those days are sadly gone now. What impact do you think that has had on, in particular, working class women's involvement in the feminist movement here?
I think, and I suppose I think back to my time here, and I wasn't directly involved in the community facilitators program, but I just think the community facilitators program was absolutely brilliant, and I do think that model can be used for other projects, which I'm happy to talk about when we talk about the IT stuff. But I think it got women involved at a very local level, and when women became the community facilitators, they know what's going on in their own communities, and they were able to raise those issues, and I think that has been a huge strength of the WRDA on being able to shine the light on issues that are facing women in very localised communities.
Thank you, Patricia. I think it was 1994 we made the transition from Women's Education Project to Women's Resource and Development Agency, and then shortly after moved to this building. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your memories of that transition.
It happened very soon after I joined the Women's Education Project. I remember the meetings up in that top attic in the WEP. I remember coming down with Joanna and seeing this building. I remember the excitement around it. I remember thinking the new name speaks more to what we were doing. The education was important, but it was also about resourcing and developing and supporting the development of women's groups, etc. I can remember Kathleen Feenan of the Women's Information Project, which was such a fantastic project, absolutely brilliant project. I remember Kathleen determined she was going to have that front room downstairs, and she got the room at the back in the end, because we were the landladies and she wasn't. But yeah, I do remember it. And then I remember we were able to buy this building at a time when that just was a very difficult thing to do, but it was a very brave, courageous thing to do, and I think a very wise thing to do, because it really grounded us with regards to funding applications and that we owned this building. It was quite amazing, really, that we did it.
Yes, thank you for that. I think it was at least partly purchased with a loan from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Yes, and this building has become somewhat of a hub for the women's sector, so we're very lucky to have it. Definitely.
It's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
It is. So through the Women Talking IT project from 97 to 99, you're responsible for getting many women's organisations online for the first time. What was that process like, and what was the impact on the women's sector in Northern Ireland?
I loved that work. Absolutely loved that work. And the Women IT project, the Women Talking IT project, it grew really out of the work that we've been doing, the regional education project. And I remember we did, just before the Women IT project, we did this piece of work in Fermanagh with Fermanagh Women's Network, a fantastic organisation. And we literally went round all the women's groups and asked them what they wanted to learn about. The project was called Women Learning Locally. And I remember over and over again it came up, computers IT. So I can't remember where the funding came from, but we got funding to buy a suite of laptops. And I realised that might sound kind of, that's what you do now, but then we did that before the FE colleges did it, outreach with IT. And I remember being at a meeting where we had put the application for and the rationale for the suite of laptops, which were going to go around all the different women's groups, to the funder. I can't remember the funder, but they sent out an expert who was male to make sure that we had got the spec of the computers right and that we knew what we were doing. And I remember sitting gritting my teeth at that meeting and thinking to myself, just go with it, we really need the funding. So he did a report to the funders that yes, the spec and everything was fine, but the one thing that we hadn't thought about was that women that maybe couldn't see very well, that they would need a bigger screen. So part of the criteria for getting the funding for the laptops was that we bought this monitor. Now monitors nowadays are about that width. The monitors in those days were about that width. So the tutors, we had to agree to it, the tutors brought all these laptops around in their bags, but they also had to hulk this massive big monitor around. Like we could have just made the writing, the font and the screens bigger, but that, and I remember it well, it was in the butter market in Enniskillen, and we had a workshop, and that monitor, the woman who was carrying it slipped and the monitor fell down the stairs. I was never so happy in my life to see it go. So that's where the Women Talking IT, we knew that there was a real hunger among women's groups that they wanted to learn about IT. So we got the funding from, I think it was the lottery, and we started the project. And I can remember WRDA went online in February 1997, and I think there was us, it might have been from Anna Women's Network and a group up in Derry that were online. And then that summer we had a workshop in Omagh to talk about the internet and what the benefits might be for women and the women's movement, and what the benefits of email might be. And out of that was born Women's Link. And there was a woman there, Susan O'Donnell from Dublin City University. She was doing research around women and the internet. So between us, we set up Women's Link. There was 6 women's organisations in the north that had an email address, and that was the birth of Women's Link all those years ago. And then the following year, the March 1998, I think it would have been, we decided to run an event and see how many women we could get online at the same time to talk to each other, which really now would be a big Zoom. But then there used to be an internet cafe in Shaftesbury Square. I'm showing my age now. And I was even nervous going into it. And I thought, no, women need to be able to go in there. So I remember going down and talking to the guy and saying, can we take this cafe over just for one morning? And we had another kind of suite that we were able to go online in, I think it was WorkNet. Then we had one in Fermanagh, I think there was one up in Derry. And we linked everybody up that International Women's Day, and there was over 70 women went online. We were so excited. We were on the evening news. We were in the papers. But when I look back on it now, all the excitement was about being online, but we didn't put any structure around what are we going to talk about. So we all got online and we were all buzzed and all excited, and then it was, so what do we do now? But it was great. It really was great.
So that's how Women's Link started then. What was the drive behind Women's Link, and what do you think the impact of Women's Link has been? Because it has survived into the social media age, where there's maybe easier or more public facing ways of kind of keeping in touch, but Women's Link has remained active and also popular.
That's an interesting question. I think the drive, to go back to the first part of your question, the drive behind it was around communication. Was there a better and quicker way of communication? And an example of the impact of that very quickly, and it was within the first year, I remember that there was a funding stream had been awarded, and there was no women's organisations had been successful in accessing that funding. And we realised that it would have taken us months to find that out. It would have been, by going to different workshops or different conferences, or people calling in for specific pieces of work, that we would have found out nobody got that funding. But on Women's Link, within a week, because a message went out, did anybody get the funding? Did anybody get the funding? And it was come back, no, we haven't heard of anybody got it. We found out very quickly no women's group had accessed that funding, so we were able to go back to that funder and say, what's going on here? So I think that's when we realised the impact of that very fast, very quick communication. I completely take what you're saying about social media, and I suppose the thoughts I would have around that is a lot of people have a mistrust or a fear of putting themselves out there on social media, because you have to sign up for an account, whether it be Twitter, whatever it is, TikTok, whatever you're on. So you really are putting yourself out there, and you also have to have a bit of knowledge of that system. Most people that are online now can handle email, and email comes into your email box. It's not, Women's Link isn't public in the way that a Twitter feed might be. So I think it still gives some privacy. It's so simple to use, and it kind of pings up when you're in your email box. So I think it is quite incredible that it has lasted all this time, but it has.
Thank you, Patricia. I think yes, that's how I feel about using Women's Link, because I'm our communications and membership worker, but I don't have any personal social media apart from Women's Link, which feels like a very different space. It feels much safer. Yeah. I suppose that's because we do still have a vetting process. You have to apply to be a member of Women's Link, and I think that's part of the kind of key to its
I think you're right.
longevity. But it's great to see it still going, and we have moved over. We're now a Google group. So
I think that's its third move, because it started on the servers of DCU, and then when Susan moved back to Canada, we moved it to Yahoo, and now it's Google Group. So and has kept going. It's quite incredible.
It is. We're very proud of it. Yeah. What do you feel the impact of social media has been on the feminist movement, and how have we responded to the opportunities and challenges?
I think there's positives and negatives. I think it has helped make the women's movement and the issues that they're working on much more visible. I think that's a good thing. I think it makes it easier for people outside the movement to join in and support campaigns. The negative side of it, and I think we saw it particularly during lockdown, is the online abuse and the trolling. It's just shocking and is particularly worse for women. And I think women journalists, activists, and politicians really have had an awful time. I would hope that, I know the UK government is bringing out, I think it's on the way, the online safety bill, and I think Ofcom will be the regulator for that. It'll be interesting to see what teeth they have, how far they go. I do hope that helps. I also think education around being safe online and minding your mental health online is really, really important. And I think the Australian government I think are the only country in the world that have an e-safety commissioner, and I think they have done fantastic work, and they've done an awful lot of work about kind of reclaiming yourself if you feel that you have been trolled or too much has gone online, or too much has been put online about you. They do an awful lot of work around that. You're also able to report issues to them. So I'll be watching with interest to see what happens with this bill, and I do hope it has teeth and there is protection there, particularly for women and girls.
Thank you, Patricia. Digital exclusion was highlighted as an issue during the pandemic. What do you think the women's sector can do to reduce the impact of this?
I think digital exclusion's been there for a very long time. I think you're absolutely right. It was highlighted, or became, I suppose the spotlight was shone on it more brightly during the lockdown. I think digital exclusion is a human rights issue. It's a social justice issue. As more and more government services are going online, banking's going online, they're closing local branches, post office branches, banks. The whole move to UC is coming down the line, and it's a digital first benefit. So I do think it's a human rights issue, and women have the right not only to participate in the online world, but to help shape it and lead it. So I think it's really important that women are in there, in that space. I think if women are excluded from it, those women who are excluded risk even more exclusion from participating in society, because it has become a space that is part of society. In particular, what the WRDA can do about it, as well as advocating about it, I think you already have the model in the community facilitators model, because I think to train up digital champions, which is some of the work we're doing in Advice NI, train up digital champions from local communities. And digital champions are not techies. It's more about how to encourage people to use that space, how to keep women safe in that space, also for parents, how to keep their children safe in that space. To me, that's what a digital champion is, and digital champions know their own communities better than any of us. So to use that model to train up digital champions, and then ask them to volunteer or otherwise to support people in their local communities to get online, I just think it's so important, so important.
Thank you, Patricia.
And if the WRDA ever wants to work on it, I'd love to do a piece of work around that.
Well, thank you. I will let Anne know. Just to go back a bit there, we've kind of covered your career with WRDA, but then after a break, you came on to the management committee, which you served on for about 10 years. How did you find involvement in the management committee? Because it can be quite a commitment.
It was a commitment, and I'm not going to say it was easy. It wasn't easy, because we were faced with the kind of the governance issues, the funding issues. It has always been difficult to get that funding in to community-based women's organisations. That was a struggle, and we also had a commitment to the staff around funding. That was really hard. We were also faced with other financial issues such as pensions, which was really difficult. So yes, while I enjoyed my time, and all the WRDA staff and management committee were brilliant, it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy space. But I think the WRDA is in a really good place now, and not that it wasn't then, but there was a lot of struggles. There always seemed to be something, but we handled it, and I think we handled all of those issues with integrity and always did what we thought was the right thing. There was other issues that came up, like I think I'm right in saying that at that time the WRDA was the first organisation to publicly say that we supported a woman's right to choose. So there was always, issues that, and they were discussed and teased out. And what I always admired about that committee was that, even if you take that example, I know that not everybody sitting around that table agreed that we went public with that, but we always reached consensus, and I always valued that.
Thank you. Yes, I think in her interview, Anne O'Reilly also touched on the fact that WRDA was the first big organisation here to go public in support of a woman's right to choose. What was that like, in as much as you can kind of talk about it? Because it must have been quite brave to be the first organisation to go public with that in a place like Northern Ireland, especially whenever there's a reliance on, in particular, government funding.
Yes, and we had to take that into consideration, and that was one of the considerations, like what are funders going to think of this? What are a lot of the women's groups and organisations that we work with, our members, what are they going to think of it? But we really did, we took the time and space to really tease those arguments out and work out where each of us was on it. And as I say, not everybody was in agreement around that table. We did not want to be funding led. I think everybody was in agreement on that. We felt it was a really important issue for women. So that's why we took that stance, and I believe it was absolutely the right thing to do. And I also think it was really important that we managed to reach that consensus.
Yes, thank you. I think that's that must have been one of the more difficult aspects of being on a management committee or a board of trustees, is once decisions are taken, they become corporate decisions, and it's for the whole board to stand over them. And I imagine that can sometimes be quite challenging, especially because I think it's important to always point this out. Our management committee are volunteers, and it's quite a demanding role to ask of somebody for no remuneration, really. So I'm always very grateful to our management committee members, because I know it's not an easy thing to do. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
What are you most proud of from your time with WRDA, and what do you feel is the organisation's greatest achievement?
I suppose I'm most proud of the woman, for me personally, and the work I was involved in. It would have been the Women Talking IT, because although it sounds crazy now all these years later, it really was innovative, and we really wanted to claim that space. And initially it wasn't even claim the space online. It was claim that space accessing women to computers and being able to use Office or whatever it was that women were wanting to use. And I remember desktop publishing, DTP was a big thing. That was so important. And then it was like getting women's groups computers that were networked and backups. That was huge. And then it moved into some of the bigger women's centres having IT strategies, and that work was so important. I think it still is important. And then getting online and being part of that space and onto Women's Link and onto the internet was just so important. So yeah, I love that work, and I'm proud of that work, and it's incredible to me the Women's Link's still there. Amazing. And what was the other one? What did the WRDA?
What do you feel is the organisation's greatest achievement, if it's different from your own?
Yeah, I don't think I couldn't name one achievement. I think the WRDA has been brilliant at being able to shine a light on issues that are facing women in very locally based communities, and then creating campaigns and advocating with women on those issues. And you know, there was many health projects like the MAS project is brilliant. The breast cervical and breast screening project, I remember it starting, absolutely fantastic. I remember Carol Ann Barr doing the women's health workshops around smoking and supporting women who wanted to stop smoking. That was way before the smoking ban. So I think I suppose the achievement is being able to shine a light and listen to what women are saying and then move that forward. I think being able to buy this building all those years ago was a huge achievement. So yeah.
Thank you, Patricia. You'll see beside you there the wee red book. That is the book that we've recorded, I think, every AGM since 1985. And I was just wondering if you have any memories or any anecdotes about past AGMs.
Oh my goodness. Well, I always remember is the red book, where's the red book, put the red book out, which is just amazing. There's so many names in there, I remember. I suppose one that stands out, and I can't remember, we did it was down by the lake, and I can't remember the name of the place. And I don't know whether it was the 25th or the 30th anniversary. And I remember the present director and the 4 past directors been there. And I remember thinking each of those women brought something of themselves to the WRDA and the work they did and how they led it. It was brilliant. I always remember Karen Armstrong was always the one to ask the question about finance from the accountants. Yeah, I have a lot of fond memories.
Thank you, Patricia. Do you have a message for our 40th AGM?
I suppose my message would be a huge congratulations. You should be very, very proud of yourself. I think the WRDA is a fantastic organisation, and I would say keep doing what you're doing because you do it very well. Keep shining those spotlights, and particularly on issues like the health issues, the community education issues, all those women who are seeking asylum that are stuck in those hotels. As well, I think digital inclusion is a big issue as well. So I would just say huge congratulations. You're doing amazing work. Keep doing it and mind yourselves in it, because it's hard work. It is hard work, but well done.